Oh, hey, come on in. We'll talk about pocket knives. All right, I have this knife I'm going to try to start on next. It's a Bear and Bull Congress. This one's made in Solingen, Germany. It's a very nice little knife. It has a little bit of rust on it in spots, but nothing major. Beautiful etch on this main blade. Again, Solingen, Germany knife. I've had it for a little while, and as you can see, it has corrosion on it. The shield is corroded right here on the bolsters. And when I first got it, it was that way, and the pins were all corroded just like they are now, and I polished it good. It looks a lot like a knife that has celluloid handles when they start outgassing, but these are bone handles. I've tested them a couple of times. They're bone handles, so it's not the handles causing it. I'm beginning to wonder if it might be the glue that they used underneath or something like that, because I polished this corrosion off once, and it stayed gone for a short while, but within a few months, it's back again, just as bad as ever. So we're going to pop these handles off, clean them up, see if we can put them back down with new glue, clean off all the old glue, or if we're just going to replace the handles. We'll see what we can do with this one. I'll begin by grinding the heads off the pins using a ball burr in my rotary tool. When I get to the center pin, I'll grind off both sides of it. Now I'll drill out these pins a little bit further using the starter bit. Sometimes I leave more pin material than I realize with that ball burr. I want to use as little force as possible when removing these scales. Bone handles tend to be very brittle and they can break easily when pried or hammered. I've broken some badly when trying to remove a pin before, and I would like to reuse these handles if it's possible for me to. I use this punch to remove the center pin. It often sounds like I'm hammering very hard, but in reality I'm using very light taps. The countertop of my workstation amplifies the sounds of the hammer. I'm marking my springs by using a file to score them lightly. 1 mark for the marked side spring, 2 for the pile side spring. I mark them near the center hole and on the side of the spring that faces the mark handle. This ensures that I get the springs back in the correct spot and in the correct orientation when I'm reassembling the knife. After those are removed, I will work to gently pry these handles off the knife. This Solingen Germany-made knife has an excellent fit and it's difficult to find a gap in them to begin. After hammering in one of the handle pins, something I really did not want to do, I was finally able to work a knife blade in between the liner and the handle and begin prying this handle loose. I found that the shield was also pinned in place, and thankfully that pin pried out without damaging the handle. I'm still mystified by what caused this corrosion. There does not appear to have been any glue, and there's some spots of corrosion around the edge of the liners as though some caustic liquid might have seeped in underneath those handles. After cleaning all of the parts with a wire brush, I put on gloves and wipe everything down with denatured alcohol. Residue from a brush or sander, along with oils from fingerprints, can prevent the glue from adhering well. I spread the glue using a wooden crafting dowel and coat the end of the bone and the edges of the bolsters as well as the flat surfaces. I've chosen to insert some temporary handle pins to hold these handles in alignment while the glue cures. I've intentionally kept the pins a bit too long. Later I can remove them, clean off the old glue, cut them to the correct length, and pin these same pins back into place. Here you see me removing these temporary pins and inspecting the knife. I did get way too much glue on the handles and I'll have to clean a lot of it off. There's just so much excess, but other than that, everything appears to be in good order. I should have glued this shield in place when I glued the handles on. To be honest with you, I just kind of forgot about it at that time. The shield is pinned, or was pinned in place, but getting that pin pinned back into the handle liner just normally doesn't work. You have to use a new pin, and I don't have any pin stock this small. So I decided I will scrape the excess glue out of the recess and use a drill bit to clean out that hole beneath it. Then I'll clip off the very end of that shield pin. I'll leave most of the pin in place, and coating it with glue along with the back of the shield should hold this shield in place for a lifetime. Hey, I'm in luck. Instead of making handle pins from regular pin stock or even reusing those temporary pins the way I'd intend to do, I'll use my pre-made Schrade handle pins. These handles are the perfect thickness for them. These pre-made pins have a dimple on the inside edge that flares out perfectly when you pin it into place. And they're domed on the outside for a great finished look. Just a few firm taps on each one sets them in place. And I need to clean the inside of these handles. I have a lot of hardened glue residue on the inside of them. Now, normally when I completely disassemble a knife, it only takes a matter of seconds to clean up the inside of these handles on the belt sander. But in this case, I'll have to clean everything by hand. Let's do a quick test fit to see how the knife works. I will look at the marks that I previously made on my springs in order to orient them correctly. Now, especially on a Congress pattern knife, the springs can easily be installed facing the wrong way. They look like they would fit either way, but sometimes microscopic differences can keep the finished product from looking right or fitting correctly. That is why I always mark my springs. I find that some of these blades are very stiff and they're binding when closing. Now I still have good opening snap, but no closing snap on most of them. I think there's still some hardened glue inside of this that sanding didn't remove, so I'll begin scraping out any residue with a wooden dowel and sometimes another pocket knife blade. Note to self, use less glue from now on. Now I'll begin the final assembly of the knife. Now at first, polishing this knife looks fairly standard. I touch up the blades a bit. I'm not trying to get a mirror finish, but since this is a used knife, I just want to brighten them up a bit. But as I kept polishing the handles and bolsters, I found that I had glue residue on the bolsters and it was very difficult to remove. And since you couldn't see it on camera, I decided to try a different camera angle. Hopefully you can see this better. The camera stand is really in my way here and it makes it a lot more difficult for me to work, but it does allow for a close-up so you can see more details of the knife. You can see which parts of the knife have been polished enough and when you need a little bit more. Okay, well, I like how this knife turned out. I did have some minor problems with it, and I'll discuss that with you in a bit. But once I brought it home from the shop and cleaned off the polishing compound, which there was quite a lot of it from the polishing process, I found that my two small blades did not have much snap. The small coping on the mark side and the small pin on the pile side. They had great opening snap, all four blades did, but I lost the closing snap on those two small blades. The coping is still a little bit stiff, but it's working in, becoming better. Still has some snap now, where it did not at all. Did not have any closing snap when I brought it back. I went through the knife, just kind of played with it. I was able to make minor adjustments and repair those two problems without taking the knife apart or anything else. And about the time I finished, I thought, I should have filmed that and made a video on diagnosing knife problems. So that's one of those things I'm kind of working through my mind now, what all I would include in that video, but that's something that will probably be coming up before too long. I'm just diagnosing knife problems. When does the knife need to be taken apart and repaired, or either by yourself or sent into a knife mechanic, or what can I do at home sometimes to fix some of these minor problems? So yeah, this is something we'll look at and perhaps talk about soon. But yeah, going back to this knife, it did turn out fairly well once I got those minor problems worked out. And again, that was just some adjustments. Now I've got oil on the blades now. These were carbon steel blades. They had a little bit of rust on them, so I've got a few spots there. Same thing with the small blade. I think, yeah, got a little bit right there at the base. I didn't try to polish that out completely because there's some very light pitting there, and I would have had to remove a lot of metal in order to do that, and I don't like doing that. This is a carbon steel knife. What I need to do is to use it, build up a light patina on these blades rather than that mirror finish, and that will help protect the blades and prevent rust. But of course, this rust was caused by the same thing that caused the corrosion on the bolsters and the shield and the pins, and that is whatever substance was underneath those knife handles. Now let's talk a moment about knife handles and outgassing. There was an old substance that they used many years ago called celluloid. It was a predecessor to plastic. Different companies had different recipes for celluloid, but it was very unstable. It might last for 5 years. It may last for 100 years. But at some point, celluloid tends to break down, and one of the components that is given off by some of the gases that are given off is sulfuric acid. So with celluloid handled knives, if you have a knife that you can tell there's not bone or anything, it's especially if it's pretty or bright colors, Christmas tree, glitter, things like that, and you see any corrosion around the knife, chances are that knife is outgassing. There's no way to stop that process once it begins. One of the things you can do that will help prevent it, or at least help prevent so much damage when it happens, is if you have a knife with celluloid handles, store that knife in an open air container. Now you want it out of direct sunlight, but you want it in an open air container. If you have it in a drawer or a knife roll or anything that will hold those gases in, if the sulfuric gases are given off, it just holds it there and it destroys the knife, and it will destroy any other knives that are in that knife roll or knife container. I don't care if you have it in a Tupperware container, cigar box, it will destroy everything in there. If it's open air where the gases can be released, they don't do as much damage. So knife storage can be very important when it comes to celluloid handled knives. I only have a few right now, and that's something I probably should have brought out, giving you examples of. But for the most part, if it's bone, antler, wood, you're safe. If it's not, and it's older, celluloid, store it separately from all your other knives and store it someplace where the air can get to it freely. But this knife, it had bone handles, so I could not understand why I had the corrosion. When I first got the knife, and it was a gift to me from a fellow member of AAPK, we both thought it had been stored near a knife with celluloid handles that had outgassed. It had the classic signs of outgassing, especially the bolster, shield, and pins. Again, a little bit of light rust on the blades, especially the part of the blades that stick up above the handle liners. And those are all classic signs of outgassing. And so we thought this knife had been stored near one of those. So the first thing I did when I received it. I polished it up real good. I didn't take the knife apart. I just polished away all that corrosion. Everything was fine. And a few months later, it began corroding again. And so when I began this process, I've had it for a couple of years. It was right back where I had started. So I knew something was wrong with it. Now, again, this one did not have celluloid handles. But once we took them off, I thought it might have been a glue or something underneath, but it was just in spots and mainly around the edges of the handles, between the handles and the liners. So I think one of two things: either this knife was exposed to some type of caustic chemical where it seeped in between the liners and the bone handles, the scales, and might have gotten trapped in there and began causing this corrosion, or perhaps this bone was stabilized or treated with a caustic chemical that began leaching out of the bone. I don't know. So what I did, by taking apart, I cleaned everything. I cleaned the underneath the handles, both with a wire wheel brush and then later with denatured alcohol. And we put it back on here. If this corrosion happens again, we know it's something in that bone, because after cleaning the bone, cleaning the liners, if there was something that had spilled on it or whatever, it would not still be there. I've cleaned all of that off. So yeah, if it returns, we know it's something inherent in that bone itself, and we will take those off, put new handles on it. So unfortunately, I don't know if this knife is completely fixed until after we wait a few months and we see, does the corrosion return or not? At that point in time, I may carry it in my pocket. I may put it in my knife store. I don't know. I don't have many Congress patterned knives, but I don't carry many of them either. I do like them. I do like the symmetry of them. Again, they're kind of the same either way. You have quite a selection of blades. In this case, you have 2 sheepfoot blades, 1 pin, and 1 coping blade. So you've got a selection to choose from, and they're just handy little knives. They're just a little bit small for me typically. I have big hands, and I prefer a larger knife. I prefer like a larger Stockman or a full-size Trapper or something like that. But yeah, this is a very good knife. Again, German manufacturer, and I just liked it. I enjoyed working with it, and I hope this has the problem fixed. But if it returns, we'll deal with it again. Well, I appreciate you guys listening and listening to me ramble. I know that some of this is rather incoherent. It's just stream of consciousness, but sometimes it's fun to just talk about knives and share that with you guys. But I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.